Ethereum, and the technology is super interesting, but to me, the philosophical reasoning is the most interesting part. And once you see the philosophical differences of what Ethereum is trying to achieve, you can't unsee that. First of all, is that the Ethereum Foundation actually wants to shrink and become smaller and become a less of an influential player in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think we're on the right track to doing that. And I have been shocked and overwhelmed by the number of founders talking to us. Somebody won a Nobel Peace Prize proving creative destruction. You have to let something die for something better to grow in its place. And I think that having this attitude is what makes an ecosystem stronger.
Today, we're diving deep into the heart of the Ethereum ecosystem, the people, the coordination, and the strategic decisions that shape where Ethereum is going next. James Smith leads ecosystem development at the Ethereum Foundation, managing a cross-functional team of more than 45 people across areas like dev onboarding, L2 engagement, enterprise adoption, founder success, and long-term ecosystem strategy. We're going to talk about how Ethereum grows, how it scales in a world of thousands of competing chains, how the foundation allocates attention and resources, and what's the biggest leverage point or points are in the next phase of Ethereum's evolution. James, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dissapeared. I'm excited to talk about the changes going on at the Ethereum Foundation and what impact that's hopefully having on the whole ecosystem.
Thank you for coming and joining me today. What brought you to the Ethereum Foundation and what keeps you there?
So it's a great warm-up question. I previously was working in London, and then I decided to go into the world of startups. And I had 2 e-commerce businesses, and I sold the second one in about 2019, and was thinking, okay, what do I want to do next? So I ended up in DeFi. And I ended up taking like self-repaying loans, learning about liquid staking tokens, and I was fascinated by it as well. And then I started doing a bit of protocol governance with smaller projects and things. And then I started talking to some people at the Ethereum Foundation. And we landed on me taking a short-term contract trial run on staking research. So I worked with a guy called Danny Ryan, who was responsible for doing proof of work over to proof of stake. And I was doing a lot of the ecosystem staking research, finding out things that weren't written down in documents. And that was just super fascinating. And then from there, I started branching out and seeing things that were falling through the cracks. So there was lots of projects. And when you come on board to do one thing and then you all of a sudden have 30 different projects going on and a team. And now I'm leading ecosystem development, and we've completely changed the way the Ethereum Foundation approaches the ecosystem. I stay here because once you learn about Ethereum, and the technology is super interesting, but to me, the philosophical reasoning is the most interesting part. And once you see the philosophical differences of what Ethereum is trying to achieve, you can't unsee that. Ethereum isn't trying to capture tons of value. Ethereum wants other projects to come on board and take that value. We want to be a neutral platform, in my mind, where if you're the Bank of Greece or the Bank of Spain, you won't build on other people's platforms because you end up being held hostage. So what happens naturally? You want a neutral infrastructure that is fair and won't compete with you as well. And that is what keeps me very mission-driven with Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. And you lead a 45-plus person cross-functional team at the Ethereum Foundation. How do you even define ecosystem development in an ecosystem as large and decentralized as Ethereum?
So defining what ecosystem development stands for, I would say it's to allow Ethereum to be understood, trusted, and used. So this is education and awareness amongst builders and founders, developers, and institutions. And previously, we've had a plan where we probably came across as not that approachable. If a founder came and spoke to us or a bank came and spoke to us, we just didn't actually have a plan or didn't have an idea of how we should interact with those organizations because the ecosystem grew up quite fast. And the Ethereum Foundation is one of many actors inside the Ethereum ecosystem, and we didn't want to be the main actor for everything. However, this year we've just made the decision to step into a lot of shoes, whether that's on a temporary or long-term basis is yet to be decided, and start talking to these founders and encourage them, start talking to organizations and encourage them about building on public permissionless blockchains.
And Ethereum has no CEO, no central roadmap, and no formal product team. Yet somehow progress happens. What's the real coordination mechanism behind the scenes?
So you could look at this in many different ways. You can take the All Core Devs call, which just happens on a bi-weekly basis. There's no voting system. It's done through rough consensus. And this allows a lot of conversations to take place publicly online. So anyone can suggest an improvement to Ethereum. There's no gatekeepers. There's nobody stopping you from joining. There's nobody stopping you from suggesting improvements to Ethereum protocol. And it keeps going because everybody believes in that core values and core mission in my mind. So everyone wants to achieve the same thing. And it's healthy debate. Inside the Ethereum Foundation, there is many different opinions of directions to go. And I actually love that, because if we all were thinking the same, we're not challenging each other enough in my mind. So having this, the Ethereum Foundation is not a normal organization. I see it as many different islands coming together to achieve a common value system that we believe in.
Okay. And where do you see the biggest coordination failures today? Not technical, but human ones.
Oh, so if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, I would have said in us being approachable or other people being approachable. So on the enterprise side, enterprises, I liken it back to the internet in 1996. Everyone was calling up consultants and thinking of like, how do we use this internet thing? How do we build a website? And this is the same with blockchain. People were starting to understand the use cases in 2024, 2025, but didn't know a good neutral outlet to go to for advice. Mm-hmm. So they were going to universities, but maybe they were more on the academic side. The Ethereum Foundation is predominantly a research organization, and we have now been able to help with ideally giving a neutral view. Obviously, we're Ethereum biased, but we're biased to anything that's a public permissionless blockchain. And I feel like that was much needed in the ecosystem for people to have confidence to build on blockchain.
Ethereum now has dozens of L2s with different incentives, governance models, and technical philosophies, right? How do you drive coordination across that landscape without slipping into centralization?
So I would say that L2s are independent with their own incentives, their own technological beliefs, and the interop protocols don't automatically create Ethereum network effects. So I would say some of the things of like where we don't drive into coordination is it's by design. So this has two problems with it as well by design. It can make the L2s look, or Ethereum look ineffective, or it can make it look too centralized if we're too coordinated as well. So it has a very fluidness to it. Depending on the problem, depending on the situation, we will get involved or decide to step back. A lot of the L2 coordination in the past few years has actually been run by L2s, and they've been taking it in turns to, hey, we'll organize this, let's meet up as well. So there's been lots of things like this that are happening. We're starting to do more regional focus as well. So in February in 2026, we're actually going to have an L2 event held in Malaysia, where a lot of the Asian L2s will come together and discuss some of the technical situations that they're in as well. And this is great feedback for Ethereum Foundation to take and for client teams to have as well. I think it's not about picking winners. It's about, we're not telling L2s what to build. And you're right, some are going down to micropayments, some are doing DeFi. There's a new one by Polygon called Katana. They actually put their assets on to Ethereum L1, and the yield actually then goes to the L2. So a lot of them have chosen very different models to actually go with as well. But one of the great things I think about coordination is the Ethereum Foundation doesn't pay for loyalty, it doesn't mandate how L2s operate, and it doesn't pick winners. So I feel like the other good thing about coordination is some L2s, some really big ones that have been announced, we haven't even been in discussions with them before. So if you are a large organization or government, you can build an L2 and not talk to anybody. And that's actually great. That's actually what you want. In today's world, you wouldn't think about building a website and going and asking for permission from someone. You would just do it. And that's exactly how we feel about the L2 ecosystem as well.
What coordination failures? I don't want to be a negative, but it's just interesting, right? Because nobody can be so perfect and for 100%, right? So I was thinking about to ask the next question. So what coordination failures between L2s concern you the most, not technically, but socially or strategically?
I think there's two that I can think off the top of my head. And the biggest gap isn't social or political. It's that users still have to think about which L2 they're on. If I'm on Arbitrum and I want to use an app on Base, that's still friction. Bridging is getting better and better, but it's not invisible yet. And I suppose a new user shouldn't need to understand roll-up architecture. And this is a coordination failure that we have taken very seriously, with UX being one of the main three things we're focusing on inside Ethereum ecosystem there in the next few years. The other one is probably about storytelling. Ethereum's L2 ecosystem has now gone to 0.005 cents a transaction. And it's clearly seeing that a lot of L2s with their own technological advances can compete on transactions per second as well. So someone outside sees fragmentation, whereas someone inside sees a thriving ecosystem with lots of different options to choose from. And that's something that I think the Ethereum Foundation and the Ethereum ecosystem needs to work hard on to not overwhelm people. And that's probably a coordination issue that I'm seeing we are starting to address, and we will address more of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you expect the Ethereum Foundation's relationship with L2s to become more structured, or will it remain fluid and adaptable?
I think it'll be fluid on relationships, structured on standards. So we're not going to create any formal governance over L2s. That would create a centralization problem that Ethereum actually exists to solve. And it's the funny meme of when you have 14 standards, someone's like, we should make a 15th standard to manage so that we don't have 14 different ones. And then you end up with 15 different standards to manage instead. And I feel like we should become more structured with shared infrastructure, clearer security frameworks like L2 beat staging system, better interoperability standards. And the structure should live in the technology, not in organizational relationships. So we see our role much more as a support and coordination function, not a gatekeeper at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The Ethereum Foundation deploys grants, strategic funding, and coordination resources across dozens of teams. How do you decide what actually deserves attention and investment?
That's a really interesting question, because we've changed this a lot in the last 8 months. Previously, we had one tool in our toolbox, it was a hammer, and that was giving out money for grants. And I think it was great 3 or 4 years ago in the ecosystem. This could help build a lot of great infrastructure and a lot of tools and brought a lot of great minds into Ethereum. But the world has now changed. And I actually feel like there is such momentum in the ecosystem by us actually pulling down grants slightly and then increasing the number of people in ecosystem development. We have been able to actually save budget costs, save our budget in ecosystem development, but have more people to actually coordinate. I spoke to someone the other day and I said, we don't actually fund things like that anymore. But what we can help with is introductions to lots of people, product feedback, trying to help you on integrations as well. And they were like, that's actually way more valuable than the money. And that was a turning point for me when I started seeing how the world has changed and what people need. When I was doing staking research, we found that there was a lot of grants and public goods needed in that to actually build more things in staking. But as the ecosystem matured and staking became a very viable business, the ecosystem took that over. And it's currently happening on privacy at the moment. We've been working on privacy solutions for the last couple of years, but now there are, I think, over 200 projects building privacy on Ethereum. And I can now start to see that the ecosystem is taking that over. Mm-hmm. And that is like another way that the Ethereum Foundation can devolve its position and influence on grants in that space. I feel like we've had a practice in the past with grants where we haven't done enough working closely with grantees. So now we have a much better rule of, if we're willing to give a grant to this team, how much time are we willing to spend with them on making sure it's a success? And that is a really good question we're now asking ourselves with every grant that comes our way as well. We still want to fund, the Ethereum Foundation has always funded things that makes no commercial sense, but are of critical importance. And that is still a huge factor for us as well.
A lot of the Ethereum Foundation's work is invisible by design, right? So what's one behind the scenes process which more people understood?
There's a number of different things. The one I would say, first of all, is that the Ethereum Foundation actually wants to shrink and become smaller and become a less of an influential player in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think we're on the right track to doing that. I also think that things like the all core devs protocols and how these upgrades get decided is actually through months and months of healthy debates and conversations through multiple different projects and organizations in the Ethereum ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So when people saw the Fusaka upgrade that resulted in a lot of really good upgrades coming through, that was actually months and months of work from multiple teams. And I think a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes work of that. It would actually be a great thing for us to actually document for the next upgrade so people can see all of the work that goes in behind the scenes.
Developer acceleration is a core pillar of eco dev, right? What are the biggest friction points developers still face when entering Ethereum?
The dev tooling in Ethereum is actually very good, so for developer onboarding. And there's actually a few projects that have started with vibe coding on blockchain contracts, which actually is super interesting. The biggest friction a lot of people say to us is they're looking for what to work on to build up a portfolio. So we've started an initiative where you can find open pull requests in GitHub that cover the entire Ethereum ecosystem. We've actually hired people who have just shown up in GitHub and they've been doing so much work that we've we need to pay this guy because this is getting embarrassing. And they now worked at the Ethereum Foundation full-time for 3 years. And there's multiple stories of people that have just shown up. So we're trying to give them more access points for things to build on. Then I think that's one of the biggest friction points. The other one I would say that is quite apparent to me is the people go into hackathons, and hackathons have the right intention but have changed for the outcomes because it's become a bit of prize farming in my mind. People go there to try and win $10,000, $20,000, and then they just move to the next hackathon. And they're not actually building anything real and sustainable. And that's actually not the developers' thought. That's an incentive design with the hackathons problem. So the biggest friction point is we're not giving them a platform to think about where the opportunities lie. And that is stuff that we're addressing in ecosystem development. So I'll give you an example. We're thinking of running a hackathon where you don't win prize money, but you might win 6 weeks in a house in Portugal, for example, and then you'll get mentored over those 6 weeks. And then we'll introduce you to investors where you can pitch your startup idea. That then brings a very different team to that hackathon because there's no prize money involved. Mm-hmm. And we're experimenting with things like this that we haven't experimented with before. So the friction points to me aren't necessarily technical. They are all about the opportunities to build on top of.
Okay. And which developer tools or primitives feel underappreciated but have the biggest impact on ecosystems' health?
Oh, I think you've got a lot of things like Remix. Remix is great because it's a browser IDE, which means you do not have to download anything. So if you are in a developing country where you can't download gigabytes to then start coding, you can open up your browser and just start coding away as well. And they now also have an AI tool in there as well. So I think there's some things like Remix that are super important to get started that people don't do enough awareness building around.
You run programs that directly support founders and early projects. What distinguishes founders who scale successfully from those who burn out early?
Okay, burnout. Okay. Well, we don't see many people burning out. Most people actually come to us and the biggest request is access to other successful founders. So I think a lot of people burn out because they haven't thought about their product idea and their product market fit enough. So they haven't had any honest feedback from people. They've been building for 12, 18 months, and then they realize it doesn't work. And while that's hard for something like the Ethereum Foundation to be very neutral on, we are definitely trying to position ourselves where we can give them honest feedback. So actually from a positive intent as well. But we are not necessarily, and it's also, how can we get you to the point where you can test this idea and double down on it, or pivot to something else? And I think that's important for us as well. So I would say on burnout, it's founders getting honest feedback. And that can be from many different avenues as well. So that can be from other founders, that can be from the Ethereum Foundation, or a lot of the time we are a connecting function. So we'll connect them to experts if their project is very technical and they can get some feedback fairly quickly.
And how has the Ethereum Foundation support model for founders evolved over the past few years?
So we've honestly never had a big focus on supporting founders up until July 2025. If you were a founder and you came and spoke to the Ethereum Foundation, we didn't have a plan or a team that could actually help you. So we have a team that's now been around for about 120 days, and I have been shocked and overwhelmed by the number of founders talking to us. And it's actually been really great to see. We don't have an infinite budget to scale that team. I could put 10 people into that founder success team and they would all have their calendars filled out a week later. And that is something that we're starting to think about. How do we digitally scale, and how do we talk to many founders and give them feedback and give them in a digital way? So there's lots of good content coming soon. In terms of the way the founder success team operates, we can now give product feedback, we can now help with introductions, and we can also help with investor introductions as well. So the Ethereum Foundation will never take an investment or equity or tokens in any project. This helps us remain incredibly neutral. And then we have the opportunity to obviously get investors involved in great projects that we are aware of as well.
Mm-hmm. And your team oversees the institutional and academic secretariats. What does that work actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yep, so I don't officially manage those teams, but on the institutional side, they're focused on long-term relationships, mainly with governments and maybe non-profit institutions. So they were involved in the Bhutan government that very recently launched decentralized identification verification on Ethereum. Mm-hmm. That was a really great success. Then you've got the academic secretariat, which I've been more involved with. Previously, we were doing academic grants rounds, and this was a way for us to bring great minds into Ethereum and get them to work on problems like zero knowledge. And this has been a huge success, and we have some great relationships around the world. However, our research team has some really good credibility and some really good knowledge that we have found that we probably don't need as much core protocol research done anymore. So we've switched to looking at how do we talk to future business leaders? How do we talk to policy in government, in universities as well? And I think that switch is actually super interesting because there's a lot of business use cases that are not highlighted enough through research that we want to start producing more content around that. So there's not been enough research around Ethereum security or L2 security. There's been tons of core protocol research, but not from a business perspective.
Academia is increasingly involved in Ethereum research, as I can see. Where is that relationship strongest, and where is it still underdeveloped? You mentioned zero knowledge, right? Maybe something else?
So it's changed throughout the years. So MEV was a very hot topic a couple of years ago. Staking was another one as well. Regionally, it's been very strong in Europe and America. We've also done some work with universities all over the world. So Latin America, Africa, Australia. The academics team were just in China. And we are extremely excited about some of the research that's been done there. And a lot of very strong researchers. So regionally, we're branching out much more as well, which I think is very positive. From a academia point of view, research has been into anything from how do you quantify decentralization through to zero knowledge, as I mentioned before, through to scaling and through to, so a lot of the sharding process that Ethereum is currently going through has been researched for many years as well. And this is in academic papers, sometimes going back decades, but never actually been implemented as well. So a lot of the work there is super interesting. I think the business policy content will be very interesting in major hubs around the world, and we're starting to do more in US, Europe, Asia as well.
Unblocking is one of the most interesting categories in your organizational chart. What are the most common blockers you see across the ecosystem?
So there's many blockers, and there's many things that we don't try to interact with by design as well. So we try to be catalysts, and this unblocking team we have a guy called Ori who is working on use cases outside of finance. So he can see exactly what is going on there. And so on Monday, for example, I'm actually going to somebody that puts blockchain into chocolate factories. Mm-hmm. And obviously the use case around this is around traceability. And that's super fascinating as well. So we're looking at what's the unblock there? Is there a story to be told that we should actually inspire more people to do other interesting things with Ethereum as well? The other part is governance. So this might be something that's long-term, non-technical research. And the work from unblocking might turn into business opportunities that we can give to founders. It might turn into research opportunities that we can give to academics. So we're starting to try to think of what opportunities are in Ethereum that we can give out to the world.
How do you remove blockers without becoming a centralized decision maker yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I've learned in the past that if we let something go, something else grows in its place. Maybe sometimes someone with a very small incident, for example, someone was asking me about, we've got this form and we're not sure how to do it. And my response was, let's just delete the form and go from there. And if we're not removing enough of these friction points, if we have to add something back in, that's okay. But we should try removing as many friction points as we can. The number of blockers we have also can be socially dealt with. So there was a staking centralization risk a couple of years ago. That is now no longer an issue with those organizations. And I feel like a lot of that was done from social consensus that happened as well. There was enough of the ecosystem cared about it as well. So sometimes we just highlight things and other people will pick this up and run with it as well. A lot of the time, people feel so passionate they've started up separate independent organizations to champion these causes as well.
Your organization includes content production, events, automation, and the global ecosystem activation. Mm-hmm. Right? In a network that doesn't sell a product, what does amplification really mean?
So the digital studio team was actually originally the Ethereum.org team. But my thinking behind that is it's 2025. Who has a website team? We should be looking at producing other content that speaks to many different generations. and also builds awareness, there is an educational burden and blocker to understanding blockchain. If I asked you, where did you learn about blockchain? Or someone asks you, where can I learn about blockchain? Everybody sort of gives the answer of, go and hang out on X for a little bit, go and read some blog posts, and in about 6 months, you'll figure it out. There's no real good, easy way to do it at the moment, which is something we're going to address. However, I feel like through video, through writing, through use of AI, we will be able to educate a lot more people a lot quicker as well. And just due to also budget constraints, by scaling digitally, we can talk to many people at once. And we can actually produce content that I think will resonate with a lot of people as well.
Ethereum has thousands of independent voices, right? How do you support amplification without shaping narrative?
We try to be as neutral as possible when doing amplification, and obviously not the same individual or organization too often. The fact it has thousands of voices is fantastic in my mind, and not everybody has to have the same opinion or the same direction. There's been many cases where you can disagree about something inside Ethereum or a direction to go, but you both want the same outcome once you understand the philosophical angles that we're trying to achieve. I think that's how we do it as well. And we are also looking at opening up. We weren't actually doing anything in terms of communications and content production. And we're actually looking at opening this up to some community voices as well, where they can produce content and help amplify. And we can help amplify that too. But also, the more voices and different voices we can actually raise up means that the Ethereum Foundation can step back again.
What's the most counterintuitive lesson you have learned about growing an open ecosystem?
I don't know if it's counterintuitive, but I call it creative destruction. This is where you have to let something, somebody won a Nobel Peace Prize proving creative destruction. You have to let something die for something better to grow in its place. And I think that having this attitude is what makes an ecosystem stronger. So because something was previously successful, like grants or conferences, doesn't mean we should keep on doing them. And we have to not be scared to keep on burning things and practice it as if it's day one. As in, like, what's the new energy? Where are we now? Where are we now in the world? And what does the world need us to do? So I feel like that's probably the hardest thing for people to do because it's worked in the past. They feel like letting it go is bad. However, I feel very strongly that being creative and new ideas is what we need to keep doing.
Mm-hmm. Such as supporting research and founders, right? That's
exactly so. Yeah. We've just started talking to founders. People are also surprised we have an app relations team, and we never spoke to Aave, Uniswap, and all these other huge projects on a regular basis and got their feedback and helped them with any issues they were blocked on. And now we have an apps team that actually does that. And I sort of love the fact that all of these projects just started up without asking for any permission from anybody. And you had the Europe's largest asset management company building on Ethereum last month, and we've still not spoken to them. And we probably will do at some point. However, that's not a requirement. They don't need us as well. So I feel like while we are there and we are available, we don't have to be involved at all for you to build on Ethereum.
And the next question follows up what you have just said. So if Ethereum disappeared tomorrow, what irreplaceable value would the board lose?
Showing that truly neutral, ownerless infrastructure can exist. If infrastructure has an owner, it owns the user. If it doesn't have an owner, then it's a neutral platform in my mind. And this is the only infrastructure on earth that no government, corporation, or individual can shut down. It's had 100% uptime since inception. And that's not a product feature. That's a civilizational choice to make. And I feel like if Ethereum disappeared, we'd lose the proof that such a thing is even possible.
James, thank you. Thank you for giving us a rare look into how Ethereum actually grows. Again, the human systems, the coordination, and the long-term thinking behind the scenes. Your work is definitely something the entire industry benefits from. What is the best place for listeners to find you and follow Ethereum Foundation's work?
They can follow me on X, which is just at Snapcrackle, or LinkedIn is also another great place to follow me on as well. I'm posting regularly on both at the moment and will continue to do so. In terms of that, there's an Ethereum .org/blog, which if you receive alerts to that, that'll give you the major updates as well. So there's those three are the main places, I think.
And I will include all the links in the description. So,
okay, excellent. Happy for anyone to reach out to me if they have questions about the Ethereum Foundation or if they want to be building on Ethereum, and happy to help support.
Thank you very much for shedding light on the human coordination behind Ethereum. This is something we rarely get to see, right? I keep repeating that, but that's true. And that absolutely drives the ecosystem forward. And to everyone listening or watching, like, subscribe, and follow, and share this episode with someone curious.